There's simply a class war going on here, and any means in which the rich and the financiers can be held to account. You notice that, Mouget started off talking about how Lehman Brothers couldn't get any U.S. attorneys to sign off on what they were doing. And it wasn't just the idea or the notion that they were afraid of criminal prosecutions. They're afraid of trial lawyers coming after them because on behalf of plaintiffs who are getting ripped off. And so they had to get European attorneys to sign off on them. And this is what I say all the time. I mean, particularly through the Bush administration, but in many respects, even under this administration, particularly when we have the Republicans hell-bent on destroying entities like the EPA to the extent that the EPA is effective. The only other way to curb the behavior of corporations is the constant, never-ending threat that when they make that economic opportunity cost calculation in their boardroom, how much will we have to pay if we don't recall that car that blows up and kills a couple of people? How much will we have to pay? Is it more than actually fixing that problem? And if the answer is yes, they will fix the problem. If the answer is no, they won't fix the problem. That's it. That's the calculation. There's no well, wait a second. There's people in that car that could die. They have a family. No. Each one of those people that they anticipate would die in that accident because the back of the car will blow up has a dollar figure attached to them. That dollar figure is a function of how hard trial lawyers go after these companies for hurting consumers, hurting workers. At this point, the consumers are investors and pension funds and across the board, those of us who had some type of stake in the financial stability of this country. And, of course, the other way that we gain protection, we gain political and economic power in this country if we are not a multimillionaire, is through unions. Jacob Hacker and Paul Pearson, Hacker was on this show very early on in his talking about his book, Winner Take All Politics. I would recommend you go back and check that out. You can always find it at searchmajority.fm. He talks about how organized labor was on the front lines during the struggle for universal health care, for the fight of Medicare for the aged. They were the main champions of organizing rights for workers and of the gradual transformation of Social Security into a strong foundation for a dignified retirement. Unions even lent, he's talking about the political power of unions here. He's talking about what is going on in this country when they attack unions. It has nothing to do with budgets. It has to do with stripping working people. Not just, 60, 70% of the country of their political power, of one of their sources of political power. Unions lent crucial support to the civil rights movement, leading one congressional champion, Missouri Democrat Richard Bolling, to later observe, "We would have never passed the Civil Rights Act without labor. They had the muscle, the other civil rights groups did not." Decades of research have shown that the economic pyramid is flatter in countries where unions are stronger. In other words, there's less financial disparity, less income disparity. In economies as different as Canada and Germany, a sturdy union presence has helped reduce income inequality. The reason isn't just that unions defend their members. They also create changes in social norms, such as pressures for non-union employers to match union gains. Recent study by the sociologists Bruce Western and Jake Rosenfeld suggests that including these indirect effects, labor's decline may account for as much as a third of the rise in American wage inequality since the 1970s. At least a third, probably the other two-thirds, would be tax policy in this country. Unions also push for broad federal policies that reduce gaps in income and wealth. They have been one of the few organized voices that have consistently pressed back against the string of tax cut bills for the rich that began in the late 1970s. Meanwhile, groups representing the affluent have only grown stronger. In the early 1970s, corporations organized on an unprecedented scale to reshape policy and debate. Almost overnight, they expanded their already formidable presence in Washington, forging bonds with wealthy donors promoting business-friendly ideas. This emboldened conservatives while creating powerful conflicts for a Democratic Party increasingly torn between corporate money and its historical electoral connection to the little guy. In more than a generation, the richest 0.1%, 0.1%, 1/10 of 1%, 0.1% of taxpayers saw their slice of the national income, including capital gains, increase from less than 3% to more than 12%. Do you understand that 1/10 of 1% controls 12% of the money in this country? Perhaps the most destructive legacy was the expansion of the reckless practices on Wall Street. And he goes on to say that some unions have problems. Unions have problems, and I would agree with that. He writes, they've been much slower to change undesirable features of union contracts, such as policies that overemphasize seniority and protect poorly performing workers. Still, just as we wouldn't block entrepreneurs from forming corporations because some firms pollute or engage in financial fraud, we should not radically undermine the rights of Americans and unions just because some hinder effective response to economic and policy challenges. Do some union practices need reform? Yes, like every single thing else in the world.